Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Get to Know Us. This time it is with Dani Lee Pearce. We just released her album today, Spider Mountain. And on Valentine's Day, this past Valentine's Day, we also celebrated the 2-year anniversary of her album, For As Briefly As I Live. And so we're going to be talking to her about both albums and seeing what she is up to. Um, let's see if I can get her to come in here. This is always the awkward part where I have to figure out how to invite somebody on to the live stream. Okay. I saw her come in, but I'm not sure if we... So sorry, everyone, just bear with me. Okay. This is awkward. I'm unable to invite her. Dani, if you're out there, are you able to send a request to me? There is a little camera down at the bottom with a plus. When I click on it, let me see. Okay. Sorry, everybody. Thanks for your patience. Let's see here. I don't know. I do not know. Bum, bum, bum. So it looks like I invited her. But I may have to hop off and try and start this again because it's not working. It looks like I invited her, but it's not working. Dani, I see you. I have invited you, but it doesn't seem to be working. Is there any way you can comment if you're able to request to join? Here she comes. Sorry about that, everyone. Thanks for being patient. It's probably just my I'm just inept at technology. Hey,
Go.
Dani. I don't know what was going on. I was trying to invite you, but it said I had already invited you, and I don't know. I
I
have
was
no
I was trying to do it through my desktop, and I'm so sad that it wasn't going to work like that. It would have been a lot better for me because I kind of like the camera on that better. But whatever, I'm here.
Okay. Yeah. There's always technical difficulties every single time I've done a live Instagram, so
Yeah.
uh, that's nothing new. But thanks for those who stuck in there. I see Woven in the house and Michael Ryder. Hello, hello. Um, yeah, so how are you doing today?
It's been an okay day. I've been back from my trip in Philly for a couple of days where I visited Savon and had a lovely weekend with him. It is 56 degrees in my house right now because the heat got shut off again. So I
Oh, gee.
I'm trying to call my friend for help about that because I don't remember how to turn the heat back on, but I have a space heater running, so I'm fine. Um,
Okay, good. Goodness.
yeah, and I've just been it's very cold here. It's like 20 degrees and windy out, so I can't really go
Oh,
out.
geez.
I am slowly trying to clean my house room by room each day to get ready to move at the end of this month because I'm moving a city over to a nicer apartment.
That's
And
exciting.
yeah, it's gonna be hopefully a much more relaxing rest of the year when I can get all of that arranged. But I'm just kind of having a lazy few days for right now.
Yeah. Well, I'm very excited about your album release, Spider Mountain, and for those of you who don't know, it was really exciting that Danny got a write-up review in the Wire magazine, which is really amazing. I can't wait to get my copy of it.
Yeah, my
I
first
think,
my
yeah, I
first
haven't ordered it yet.
my first print review. I'm going to be able to go to Barnes and Noble and buy a copy of it when it's out, and that feels really cool that I'm able to
Yeah.
buy myself in print.
Yeah, I don't think it's quite out yet. But
Yeah.
uh
The,
yeah, so that's congratulations about that. That's a pretty big deal.
mhm.
Yeah, so I guess let's just get into it. I guess the first thing I usually ask folks is like how they got into music themselves, just like as a listener, and if you have any memories of like a first favorite song or album that you bought or anything like that.
As a listener, would have been a very early age when I first got into music. I came from a very religious family, and they were always playing like Christian rock CDs around the house and in the car all the time in the late 90s and early 2000s. So that's a lot of the first music that I heard. But the little secular music that I was allowed to hear made a much stronger impression on me. And I do remember that one of my first favorite songs was Head Over Heels by Tears for Fears. I was immediately struck by how melodically different it was from a lot of other pop and rock music that I heard up to that point. It had really nice chords and really nice progression.
Yeah.
That song and Tears for Fears in general stuck with me for a very long time. And this was like at 2 years old I first heard that band. So I
Oh,
can
cool.
remember back very far.
Yeah, yeah. I love Tears for Fears.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The,
Um,
the first album I would have bought would have been Dead Man's Party by Oingo Boingo when I was about
okay.
18, I think.
That's cool. That's a really good album.
Yeah, I was just starting to kind of figure out how to buy my own music and how to look for my own music around that point. So that was a very important time for me. I remember the whole family was in the car with me, and we went out for a drive, and I played that CD for everybody to hear during our drive. I forget what it was we were doing, but it was some important outing, and I got to do that. And so I slowly started building my own collection after that point. And then I had to sell it all for weed when I was about 21, 22. And then I building a new collection.
Okay.
Not my weed, my housemate's weed at the time. But yeah,
Hey, yay. Oh, that sounds rough.
mm-hmm, real time. This was back when I was still homeless and couch surfing everywhere. I was always living with a different bunch of people every 6 months or so. So,
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, okay. So I guess like when was it that you first started writing your own music or getting into recording and writing yourself?
well, in middle school, I was in the band. I was a clarinetist, and I was just learning to play, and I was just learning to read music at the time. Song in terms of songwriting, I had been trying to write songs since I was probably about 8 years old. Back then, I had kind of very limited templates for how to do that. Basically, like most of what I was allowed to hear at the time was one Christian rock and two Weird Al Yankovic. So what I tried to write was either parody songs of popular, or I tried to write Christian songs for a very brief moment because I listened to a lot of Michael Card in those days, and I really liked how he was able to directly adapt scripture into music. And that's something that still kind of fascinates me to this day, since as my friends say, the Bible is the greatest book of like witchcraft if you read it right. So I was very interested in that, and kind of the lyrical flow of scripture adapted to music is still something that leaves a big impression on me today. So that was among my earliest attempts to write, and I continued to try off and on throughout middle and high school. I started to try to write original songs, I would say, around age 16, 17, 18. Actually, no, I thought of something as early as 2014. Or no, not 2014, I'm sorry. Age 14. And that was a melody I kept with me in my head for several years, and I finally turned that into a song on Dandelion Heart. Um, Composing music by computer was something that I discovered that you could do around 2009 early. I had an independent study period in those days, where I'd literally just got like an hour or two to myself in a room where I'd finish my homework and then I could just go and fuck around with the computer for as long as I wanted. And I found GarageBand on there, and it was on there that I started tinkering around with sounds in it. And I made a whole album of GarageBand loops put together in weird arrangements in 2009. And that was my first foray into making my own songs. I only knew that GarageBand was the one way, or I knew at that time I thought that GarageBand was the only way I could make music on a computer. So I every time somebody had a Mac computer, I would always ask if they had GarageBand on it, and then I would ask if I could use it. And so I did this off and on for the next couple of years, almost always making music in school, but occasionally I would make music at my friend's house too. And in 2010, I made my first song original, uh, with my own original score and my own original melodies. And then I started doing the same at school during, I went to a place called the Center of Advanced Learning, which was some special classes in specific fields of interest. And during time when I had no work to do, I would make music there. And some of my earliest surviving songs today originate from what I produced in those days.
Oh, it's really cool that you're able to find time within school to play around
Oh,
making music.
I always tried to find a spare moment to write music. It was such a fun thing to do. It was so engaging for my brain. And I didn't know yet that it was something I wanted to do for much longer afterward, until around the time when I was really listening to music. I was really starting to get serious about liking and listening to music in 2013 and 14. And this was when I started watching documentaries, like the classic album series, where they go into specific classic albums and they kind of go into the mixing process and the writing and recording process, the instrumentation. And it was there that I was like really enchanted by the whole process of making things come together. And that was when I was like, I might want to actually like really do this as a thing for the majority of my life. And I started reading about many different bands, and I started reading about their history, their discographies, and absorbing all this trivia that I could about it. And it was immensely fascinating to me. And it was around that time, and I had already been making music for a couple of years at this point under the alias of Kansas City 7 Up. And at this point, I actually suspended that alias because I wanted to reinvent myself more seriously. And I wanted to learn how to actually get good at mixing and get good at different production techniques. So I made a lot of very experimental, like psychedelic-y type music in 2013 and 14, trying to come up with kind of an original way to kind of communicate the vision that I had in my head. And it was when I came out as trans that it kind of all really came together for me, and I knew what it was I wanted to be as an artist. And I already had the last name of Pearce taken from a doctor I saw that kept getting my last name wrong, and it was Pearce one day. And then Dani Lee was just me filling in the rest. Dani was the name that my grandparents always called me growing up, and so I made it the feminine version of that. And then the Lee comes from a friend I had named Nana Lee, who I thought that was a really pretty name, so I kind of lifted the Lee from that. And it was from there that, I was kind of born, and my music from there was born. And it took me roughly another year after doing that to sing. And I learned I could sing from doing musical theater in high school. I was Orin the dentist in our little shop of horrors play. I had a couple musical numbers all to my own. And I discovered that one, I was really good at singing, and two, I really liked singing for people. And I always got like a big round of applause because I was always a hit with audiences in school in those days. And that was very inspiring for me. Um,
Yeah. Well, you have a lovely voice, and that is also a really awesome story about how you, yeah, how you kind of transformed yourself and whatnot.
yeah,
Um, Yeah, so I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about Spider Mountain and also maybe about For as Briefly as I Live and
Okay.
how they relate or don't relate or anything that
Uh,
you wanted to share about that.
I'll start with For as Briefly as I Live. That album kind of came together in somewhat bits and pieces over the course of the late 2010s. This was during the latter period of me staying in Portland, and I had already the song Ready or Not was the first thing that was kind of already written for that album, and that originated from when I made Absolute Whoopsie, the immediate previous album. The song For as Briefly as I Live existed around the same time and was a lot darker of a song than it originally became. And everything else around it I wrote during my most recent attempt to go to college around that time. I remember writing What Do You Expect Me to Do during waiting for my math class to begin. And I was just thinking about, like, if I died, would there still be music there? Would I still be able to do the things I enjoy doing today in the afterlife? And so these are all these questions I was asking myself. Um, and so it came together very slowly. I ended up writing a good half of the album when I met my current engineer, Maddie, in person for the first time in early 2019. And during the first half of that year, we actually dated for a bit, and it was a really wonderful time. And it radically transformed kind of how I view relationships and how I engage with them. And from there, like, I wrote Undoctored Spirit Wife, I wrote Two Little Pansies, I wrote the song My, and I finished a bunch of the other stuff on that album around that same time. I actually finished the album at Maddie's house, and we filmed a couple music videos there that I later, released with y'all. And so, 2019 was kind of a big year in terms of like my art kind of shifting in a direction away from what I had made up to that and previously. And I heard about Grimalkin around that same time through Backwash, who was on Grimalkin at this time. And so I sent For as Briefly as I Live to y'all, wanting to see if you would be interested in releasing it with me, and y'all were. And so I ended up here, and it's been a wonderful time since then. Now, Spider Mountain comes a year later. This was the first album that I made not in Portland. I made Spider Mountain. This is my first album that I made while living in Wisconsin. And it follows off of the end of a very painful year where I attempted to move towards the east, and it failed pretty bad. I lost a lot of really good friends because of some bad miscommunication, and was suffering from a painful lung infection that I was kind of always just living in great fear of, if I was going to die or not, because I was in such great pain and I had no idea when that pain was going to make me capitulate. And I took a 3-day train ride from Pennsylvania back to Portland, Oregon. Um, and I had barely any food with me, so I was not able to really eat on that trip until I got back. And when I got back to Portland, I was homeless again. I had absolutely nothing. And this time I didn't really have the community support I used to, because everyone had just kind of forgotten about me and moved on with their lives. So going from there to Maddie helping me get a house here in Wisconsin to recovering from that lung infection, all just made for like a really stressful and dark year. I remember just lying in bed, unable to sleep all night, eating nothing but fruits and vegetables. Like, I would literally just load up a plate of fruit and different veggies, and I would just eat that because it was the only thing that I felt like I could eat that didn't fucking hurt to eat. Um, and I would be in so much pain. I would just like have like game streams on to try to calm me down, to try to help me sleep. And it was in this immense period of pain and fear that I started just disassociating, and Spider Mountain appeared in my brain as this mountainous foresty area that kind of resembled the forest I grew up in close to Mount Hood. And it was made up of things that I used to fear that I no longer feared as much, like spiders and dark places. And there was like a cabin in rivers, and it was just very dark and cobwebby and tangly with vines and things, very green and brown and gray, and lots of nice colors like that. And out of this place, there was also a person that kind of represented these same ideas I imagined, holding somebody who, you know, completely transcended gender. They had a really lovely voice and were so warm and were so comforting. And I was partially able to visualize this person listening to the music of David Sylvian a lot at this time, because David Sylvian is a big influential artist to me and has a very comforting voice to listen to. I think I must have been listening to the Dead Bees on a Cake album a lot in this period. I remember being very comforted by those songs and really wanting to kind of just recreate this calming energy that I was feeling that was helping me getting through this time. And this is where the songs for Spider Mountain started to appear, and I wrote most of them during those months in the autumn and winter of 2020.
Oh, wow.
And recording them slowly, day by day and week by week, with what energy I had to do that with. And then I was able to properly finish everything after I was finally got my lung infection treated, and I was able to recover. But at the same time, I was like dealing with an abusive housemate that I had the time. That was it was taking a lot out of me. They gave me almost no care for the pain I was going through, and they mostly demanded care from me. So that was really hard. And yeah, Spider Mountain just kind of represents these places that I went to get myself through those times.
I see. Yes, sounds very dark and very heavy, and I'm sorry that you went through all that. But I'm curious now that you're kind of like come out the other side and you have the album written. How does it feel like when you listen back on the songs? Does it feel healing or good now, or does it kind of make you remember, or is it a negative thing or a painful thing?
I mean, I've always had a harder time listening to my own music more than other people can. But with Spider Mountain, I do remember that being an album that I was proud of. And there are still some songs on it that I do listen to every so often that I do enjoy. Every Form I really like. Eurasian Craig Martin I really like.
It's a really great album.
Yeah, like I think it's mostly the album's second half that I'm the proudest of. Like, Fuzz
Okay.
and Craig Martin and Every Form are like the three tracks that I am most comforted by when I listen back to it. So, and Every Form definitely kind of it speaks to the strength that I had to build up to endure all of that. And I think every Form and Destined Not for Land were like two of the only songs that were already written, and then everything else I kind of wrote just in that span of time. So yeah.
Yeah, I see. And for those of you who are watching, just so you know, tonight at 7 o'clock, we are going to be having a listening party. We're going to listen to For As Briefly as I Live, and then we're going to listen to Spider Mountain, and you'll have a chance also then to ask Dani any questions, or we can hear more information about what she wants to share with us about those albums. So let me ask you a little bit about like what was your production or recording process? You said you worked with Maddie.
Yeah.
If you wanted to share anything about
So
that.
my process has evolved very slowly. Most of the time, I'm literally just like working on this laptop right. This is where all the magic happens. It's this and this microphone right here, and
All
that's literally
right.
what I need to do to record everything
Oh, great.
and write everything. I usually write all the lyrics in my phone, and then I just hold my phone in one hand and my mic in the other hand, and then I just record everything that I'm reading. Um, it's I speak a lot more differently than I write, so it definitely helps me to kind of communicate ideas that are hard for me to express without an aid for writing.
Yeah.
Uh, so it's that I use FL Studio 12.3 and I have since 2017. Um, this mic was mailed to me by an early fan in 2016, and it's been a very loyal tool ever since then. But since then, I've acquired the use of my friend Maddie's studio in their basement. They have a very complex studio with a lot of the nice gear. They have a lot of microphones, including some old ones from like the 50s and the 60s, because
Oh, wow.
they're a microphone enthusiast, and so it's really cool to be able to record into a microphone as old as a lot of my old favorite music.
Yeah.
Um, and they're
Very cool.
I usually record there just to capture my voice because I can capture my voice the best out of her equipment. But I will also send my music to her for mixing and engineering purposes because I now have intense audio hallucinations whenever I try to mix. I never know what it is I'm hearing, and Maddie's ears are a lot better trained for that sort of thing. So
Yeah.
I rely on her greatly for that. We're currently working on mixing the album that I plan to submit for next year at the moment. And so I will be communicating with them as much as I can in the coming weeks about getting that project finished. So,
Yeah. Yeah. And Michael Ryder is in the house, and they asked how you met Maddie. At Small World, Michael knows Maddie as well.
yeah, I,
That was really cool.
I find it really cool that you also know Maddie. So I met Maddie on Twitter in 2018. I tweeted out one day that I just really wish that I had more people to talk to because it was a very lonely time. And Maddie just kind of reached out. Maddie just like felt a calling in their soul to like start talking to me. And we talked literally every day from that point onward for the rest of the year. And we finally met each other in person in January 2019, and that was where we developed feelings for a short time. And we broke up in June, but it was a very like it was full of love, and it was a mutual beautiful parting. We had a very big cry about it, but we love being friends with each other still and
Yeah, that's great.
family to each other. And Maddie has proven since then to be like one of the most important people in my life today. And they have supplied me with so much. They've supplied me with this house, with this laptop, with this. Like, I can safely say that, like, a big chunk of why I'm here today is because of them. They've given me a new life, and they continue to make my life so much better than it was. So I'm so thankful for them. They are true family to me, and I hope we never forget one another for as
Yeah,
long as we live.
Maddie's great. Yeah,
We
and
we've
yeah, go ahead.
talked about being chosen sisters until one of us dies, basically. Like I can't wait for us to be old women together.
Yeah, yeah, Maddie's great, and she's been like a supporter of the label and everything, and yeah, and I definitely we kind of still are in the process of figuring out like production stuff that we want to do in the future, but I definitely plan on like picking her brain about like production stuff and seeing if that's
Um,
something that she would even be interested in helping with us in the future.
oh,
But
absolutely. I think
yeah.
that yeah, and Maddie has an album of their own that they've been working on for 5, 6 years now. Actually 7 years now. And I've been telling them every time they talk about it, be like, you should just send it to Grimalkin. I'm sure they'd love to release
Oh,
it.
definitely. Yeah, definitely.
you,
Yeah.
you'll get a chance, hopefully soon, if you haven't already, to hear how beautiful a singer they are and how beautiful an orchestrator they are. Like I fully believe them to be like the Tony my Tony Visconti basically.
So to talk a little bit about influences, you did
Yeah.
mention David Sylvian, which
Mhm.
I was like listening to some of his catalog the other day after you mentioned it because I knew who Japan was, but I didn't ever even listen to like any of the solo work.
Yeah.
So I can definitely now that you had told me that I could hear how he may have influenced you. But I wanted to see if you wanted to talk more about that or
Yes.
other influences, whether they're musical or not. They don't have to be music influences. They can
Yeah.
be whatever. Yeah.
I wrote down a good collection of them. Well, it's funny. I found David Sylvian actually through the music of Robert Fripp, who was the lead guitarist and frontman of King Crimson, essentially. And so, King Crimson was definitely an early influence from my prog days, but it's through all the connections of Robert Fripp work with, which is hundreds and hundreds of people, that I found
Mm.
a person named David Sylvian. I was really enchanted by this person's voice, and through that I found his album Brilliant Trees, which I fell in love with almost immediately. And from there, Gone to Earth, Secret of the Beehive, Dead Bees on a Cake, and especially
Yeah.
his latter albums, Flemish and Manaphon, which are like completely deconstructed freeform music. And I've really been into all that music. And then I later listened to Japan and I realized, oh, okay, so apparently his whole thing is taking the pop song and just putting bits and pieces of it until there's just pure sound left, which is what he got by the point of Anaphon. So he's definitely been a big influence based on both his music and his voice, which is very much in my vocal range. Um, other other influences have been John Martin's 80s work, because he has some very interesting textural styles from that period, and I listen to those records quite a lot as like therapy music. Um, Joni Mitchell, in terms of songwriting, is a big one. I really love their album Mingus and their album Dog Eat Dog a whole lot. And I also really like Night Ride Home. And let's see, I also have Gil Scott Heron for his ability to make political music extremely listenable and calming and groovable and just really well written stuff. Level 42 is one of my oldest musical influences. That was kind of my introduction to funk music, but especially like jazzy-ish new wave music. I still listen to their records. I still love the fuck out of them as a band. It is so fucking windy here. Um, Oingo Boingo is another big influence, because there is compositionally a lot of weird complexities about like like minor chord shifts and melodies and scales and stuff. Um, Pearls Before Swine, the big lyrical influence. Tom Rapp wrote very beautiful songs at such a very young age. Like his classic album Balaclava, put that 21 years old. Um, and I still listen to that to this day. I also really like the album The Use of Ashes. Television Tom Verlaine is really good stuff. I really love that strand of post punk that is like melodic and whiny, but also like philosophically like interesting and experimental. So Tom Verlaine, Television, and Magazine, kind of that whole genre of post punk is
Mm.
so good to me. Um,
Woven In's asking has Roxy music influenced
oh,
you? And I kind of wondered about Brian Eno
oh,
even
abs-
myself.
absolutely music. I fucking love Roxy music. Late 70s and early 80s albums. The song "Oh Yeah" from Flesh and Blood is probably one of my favorite songs like ever. Because it has such this beautiful soaring quality to it, even though it's just about literally like playing music on a radio. But I also like Brian Ferry's solo work. His two middle 80s albums fucking rule. Brian Eno, definitely, I've loved his stuff quite a lot. I haven't listened to as much lately just because like I've been on my voyage exploring so much other stuff. But considering I have been getting back into a lot of my old listens from when I was a teen lately, I will have to check out Brian Eno stuff again, because I do remember loving Another Green World. I do remember loving
Here
his
Comes the Warm Jets is amazing.
Yeah, Here Come the Warm Jets. Um, what was
I
that? There's an album he did in 1991 that he never released. Um, I forget what it's called, but I love listening to that. I love listening to My Life in the Bush of Ghosts. Um, his 2005 album, I think it's called Another Day on Earth. Um, and a few other ones that I can't quite remember the name of, but yeah, all that's definitely there. Um,
Yeah, I've forgotten to mention it before, but like your lyrics are always amazing. You're a great lyricist and whatnot. And I was just thinking with Ryan, some of his lyrics too are just really yeah, they just there's like a bit of humor in it, but there's
yeah,
like it's also like really odd, but in a good way. I don't really I don't know how
yeah.
to explain it,
Brian,
but
Brian Eno always held the philosophy that words are not the most important part of a song. So he would just write complete gibberish on the few times where he did actually sing. That's why, like, one of his most profound bits of music is him singing "I'll come running to tie your shoe."
yes,
For me,
yes, yes.
I've had such weird dreams about that particular. Um, but yeah, I learned from the best in terms of my own writing, like Joni Mitchell, David Sylvian, Gil Scott Heron, Pearls Before Swine. Like all of those songwriters and more have like influenced the way I write. But I do have some non-music influences as well. I put some down for film, video games, television, and literature, and just like my own life experience. Like I put down some film directors. I put down Jim Jarmusch, Coen brothers, Orson Welles. Particularly Orson Welles has been like a lyrical influence because Chimes at Midnight is so wonderfully written in terms of a screenplay. I love listening to the dialogue in that film because some of it is so obtuse and yet it's so beautiful and so funny. And you know, you have Orson Welles basically playing a medieval Santa Claus in that film. It gives me so much joy to watch that. Also, The Other Side of the Wind is similarly written really well as a screenplay. I believe that one's on Netflix for anyone who has Netflix. It's really wonderfully done, and it makes for a good parody of the new Hollywood style in its own way. I also put down Tim Burton's work because, in terms of the atmosphere of my albums, I do take a lot away from Tim Burton's 80s and 90s films. I do love his Batman movies, and I watched Beetlejuice many times because I had a friend who fucking loved Beetlejuice so much. Mars Attacks is a fun time. Um, but I do think definitely my favorite films from that era are the Batman films. I
Oh,
just do take away a lot from just kind of that dark and moody aesthetic, the one that kind of pitch of the dark and the horrific and the morbid. And so I'll do a lot of my own of that myself.
yeah.
Um, I have the movie The Last Unicorn listed because, again, another really well written film in terms of its screenplay because it takes directly from the book. And so a lot of the dialogue is very whimsical and poetic. And I really love just to the characters talk in that movie. I have Shigesato Itoi down for video games. He's the person that created the three Mother games, where we know in this country as the Earthbound game. Really well written stories, really funny, very heartfelt, extremely good narrative structure, and also amazing music. So all of that figures into my work in its own way.
Yeah. And
Um,
Melody.wave asked if Nick Cave was an influence. I I'm a huge Nick Cave fan,
so
by the way, and I'm definitely
I
influenced by him, but
I
curious.
actually haven't heard a lot of Nick Cave. I've heard the song
Okay.
people. I've heard the song people just ain't no good, and that was because it was in Shrek 2. But that's pretty much the only
I didn't
bit.
know that. I haven't seen Shrek.
Yeah,
That's funny.
yeah. In the scene when it's the sad moment.
Weird.
So the characters are all in the poison apple, and like Puss in Boots says, "I hate Mondays." During that whole scene, Captain Hook is singing "People Just Ain't No Good" on the
Oh,
piano
that's
organ.
funny. I had
Um,
no idea.
yeah, that's a little trivia bit for you.
I think you would like Nick Cave. I think you would if you
I
checked
think
it.
I remember trying to listen to like Murder Ballads are one of his albums. I'll have to take another listen. No, actually, I heard the Skeleton Tree when it came out, and I do remember loving the Skeleton Tree a lot. So I'll have to re-listen to all of that again. I have a lot to listen
Yeah.
to. The voyage
I
continues.
I would
Um,
probably, if I could recommend, I would say Tender Prey. Check out Tender Prey. This is an older one, and just
okay.
to like, he's really progressed over the years. But yeah, but anyway,
Yeah. I'll, um,
I could always make you a Nick Cave mix sometime.
I would love.
Um,
We have references down here. Star Trek, specifically the '90s shows, I watched them
oh,
quite a lot. I very much
which is your favorite? Which one's your favorite?
DS9 by far. Like
Yes, that's my favorite too. I was
it,
just curious. I like
it,
them all, but yeah.
it it's the queerest and the most diverse and
Yes.
best at handling the themes that it tackles, in my view. And I
Yeah.
these themes stick with me quite a lot, and do kind of find their way into my songs every so often. I find myself
Yeah.
more and more with recent writing, like including basically plots of certain episodes from both DS9 and TNG into
Yeah.
my lyrics. So I find that quite fun. For literature, I have Never Angeline North, who is a dear friend of mine. Never Angeline North is basically singularly responsible for the reason I write the way I do today. I read Seaway back when they were first putting it out in the mid 2010s, and it radically kind of just opened my mind to just the ability to open my brain and just let whatever was in come out, to not try to write any specific way, to just let myself be free with my lyricism. And so never really helped with that. And then I also have Terry Pratchett, who I really love the Discworld books of, and I really love his writing and his themes as well. And occasionally finds its way into my writing as well. For as briefly as I live, make reference to his own depiction of death, which is one of my favorite characters in literature I've ever read about. Um, for things that fall into none of those areas, I put down my Christian upbringing because I write about God a lot in my songs, and that's all having to link back to just that upbringing. Like the
Mm.
theme, especially in my more recent work, is that I'm constantly always at war with God.
Hmm.
I'm constantly dissecting the way other people see God and the way other people try to be God. So that's something that fascinates me a lot. And also astrology and other alternative theologies like Satanism and stuff. It's all stuff that I kind of explored over the last few years. All of it's found my way into my music and just the way that I write. Like, I'm obsessed with just finding out people's signs and people's charts and stuff. Just, out of curiosity, just to like get a bit of a weird, not too accurate clue about certain people and certain behaviors and the way things are in the universe and all that. But yeah, so big, big, big array of things that kind of all find its way into my art, and I kind of make my own little webs out of it, essentially.
Yeah, yeah, that's interesting that you bring up the Christianity. I can relate to that too. I think my upbringing, which was Catholic, has definitely influenced me. I have a very like not a positive relationship pretty much with religion and Christianity, which I
Yeah,
think probably the case for you too.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny because my mom was raised Catholic, and she found Christianity to be a lot more freeing, which I think is fucking hilarious. Because I never felt very freed by it at all. But I guess her way of seeing it is a lot more of an outlaws perspective, I suppose. So,
Yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, so I wanted to also ask you if there was anything you wanted to talk about that you're listening to right now, that you
okay.
wanted to shout out. And it looks like actually Melody.wave is asking what resampling techniques inspired you the most on the production front? Did you find yourself centering on a certain workflow?
Resampling? What exactly does that refer to? I'm a bit confused. I apologize.
Yeah, I'm not sure either.
Because
Do, do, if you want to elaborate in the comments?
Yeah, I'm not the smartest when it comes to words to describe music things sometimes. So, like, it's not your fault. But in terms of like what I'm listening to now, I will answer that for you.
Okay. Yeah,
The
if they follow up, I'll let you know.
Yeah, the Blue Nile has been a repetitive listen. I've been listening to their first two albums quite lately. On my ride back from Philly, I listened to them almost exclusively on the way home. Prefab Sprout is another big recent thing I've been listening to a lot, and another big lyrical influence on me recently because Patty McAloon is a genius songwriter, and I
Hmm.
write things as good as him one day. um, I've been listening to a Welsh band from the 80s called Frewer, which is really hard to pronounce traditionally from a Welsh band, but they put out two albums in the 80s that was a self-titled or that was called Doot Doot and Get Us Out of Here, and they're both melodically very just very calming to listen to. Um,
Yeah.
I've been listening to the Brazilian musician Marcos Valle. His self-titled album was introduced to me by Maddie, and been big listen for me recently. It's very good. Magazine I've been listening to a lot. Ice House, I really like their 1986 to 1987 album. Um, Everything But the Girl has been a often listen. Erasure I've been listening to a lot, and just reconnecting with a lot of music that I listened to as a teen. A lot of progressive rock bands, a lot of like old funk bands, old soul music, psychedelic rock. A lot of 60s and 70s stuff that I put off listening to for a long time because during my darkest moments, it's very hard to listen to all of that music. Like, I even put on the Doors at one point last week because somebody I was talking to on Twitter had been talking about the Doors, and I was like, "Oh wow, I still really like the Soft Parade." Apparently, okay. Connecting with
Yeah.
all of it has been nice. It's nice music to listen to when summer comes around. So yeah.
Yeah, it looks like Melody.wave followed up, said, did you sample generative synth patches in a certain way?
So I'm when it comes to this, I pretty much only use presets. Sometimes I tweak a tiny bit, like I and the sustain or the release or the attack or something. So like I literally never do big patch changes. The instruments I use it all, and I pretty much just only use presets for this album. I focus mostly on using uh, Spitfire Labs and Toxic Biohazard because I wanted to make like a more kind of ambient kind release, and those two libraries were sounds that I was looking for, and I'm really happy about the soundscapes that I was able to create for a lot of the songs. Like ambient music, quite a good time.
Yeah.
I'm discovering. I used to be afraid to make it just because I didn't want to sound boring for a long time.
Yeah.
But I'm kind of opening up more to just letting myself push aside rhythm for a moment and just focusing on mood because it's not previously been a thing I focused on in my music. So it's
Yeah.
fun little creative exercises for me, and it's allowing me to kind of keep myself branching out, keeping each album different in its own way because I always try to keep myself and keep myself changing with every release. I like to start one almost ever. So it's good that things like this are pushed that way.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so moving in a little bit about mutual aid work. So as you know, Grimalkin's that's one of our core values is mutual aid, and typically all of our tape releases they usually go to some sort of either person's need of mutual aid or an organization's mutual that's doing mutual aid work to support them, and they also kind of like get out the word about what they're doing. And in the
Yep.
case of Spider Mountain, you chose to give it back to us, which we really appreciate it. We are currently we need another $100 for a collective member that we're fundraising for a mic and mic accessories for, and we
Mhm.
need about 330-ish dollars to help us cover we're transitioning to a 501c3
Yes.
nonprofit, and to finish covering those fees. It's a rather long and expensive process,
Yep.
and then we also give our artists tapes and lace when we're able to make them. There's a little hiccup right now with new lace for new releases, but for yours example, like your release has lace. And so we raise money to be able to cover those costs as well, so we can just give them to the artists and mail them to them. And right now we're just looking to try to cover April and May just with tapes, and that's about $70-ish dollars. So anyway, we really appreciate
Yep.
that you chose to donate it back to the label, which is definitely not necessary or asked for, but it was very kind of you. And I guess I wanted to hear from you personally, I guess, why you chose to do that. And
Oh, because I believe very strongly in the collective. I believe that we deserve all the support that we can get. And if my music can provide a little more towards making these things possible, then I want to make that happen. And I plan to every one of my releases for at least a long while to be putting those physical proceeds back into the label, because I want us to get that. I want us to get that 501 to be able to, support our own. I want to be able to have enough one day to be able to pay each other for the other services that we provide outside of music, because I do believe that we deserve all of that. We deserve to be more self-sustaining than we are currently. And, with each donation, each physical proceed that my releases are able to put back in the label, it gets us closer to that. So, that's going to be my own way of helping us get there, is to help us with that way.
yeah, it's awesome. Well, we really appreciate it. And yeah, and kind of bouncing off of that too, part of what we're trying to do with Grimalkin is kind of, create alternative ways and space for artists. Our ultimate goal would be that all of us could earn a living wage, from our music. That's probably a very far distant reality, but we're not gonna stop trying. And so a lot of the things we do is we do try to find alternatives, or to create um, basically kind of well, we can't really take on all the problems of the music world or industry or business,
Yeah.
but I'm always interested in hearing from folks whatever they wanted to talk about in regards to things that they would like to see. Well, first off, it could be positive. So it could be things that you're seeing that you're seeing elsewhere that are good, but also what may be things that you're seeing locally, or like in your local scene, or within the music business or music industry at large, that you want to see different happen differently.
Well, my wildest dream would be to completely destroy the Telecommunication Act of 1996, because of how centralized all the music in the industry has become, how you now need to get everything through very specific channels, through very specific people connections, just to be able to make a decent amount from it, has become like just so frustrating and so punishing to most artists, that I really believe that by getting rid of that act, we can go back into decentralizing music, so that there are many, many different channels to allow for, like, better musical success, better, longevity in terms of resources and other stuff, because, it really isn't sustainable the way things are right now. You know that act, from what little I've read about it, is that it went a huge mile toward centralizing all of music, even though its goal was stated to do the opposite. And a lot of people stopped receiving the visibility they once had. A lot of new music just kind of got cut off of the main communication, and it started to consolidate itself all around just like the artists who were already big and who were already successful. And it just like, I guess that's what I'd love to see more than anything else, is to just have the industry become decentralized again. You know, not just have the three big labels, but more like, 300 like smaller like ours, you know. I would love for people on this label to be just as big as anybody from any, that just needs a more leveler playing field.
Yeah.
In terms of how people get noticed, how people are able to get out there and sell their music. Like, they're just,
Yeah.
there needs more for those of us smaller artists, really. Um,
Yeah, and I honestly think the only real way to do that is for us to create what we want, because we as long as we're relying on the Sony or the Universal Music or the Warner Musics of the world to like make things better, it's just not that's just not
I mean,
gonna happen.
if those companies could somehow ever be broken up into like 100 smaller labels of their own, that would be the ideal dream. Just have a whole world full of small labels about as big as us, but with and the resources to really give their artists, the home that they deserve. Because
Yeah, and
from
from
all,
what I understand, it's like the opposite. They're like they swallow up all the small labels. So there's a lot of labels that were independent and small that are now like, I guess maybe they were desperate for support or they were offered support, and so now they're underneath like
yeah,
those big major record labels. Like, yeah,
there needs to be more ways for the little fish to fight back against the fish. So
yeah. Yeah. And okay, so then on that note, we here at Growalkin, we believe that music is a vehicle for positive change and, documents our stories, our experiences, our history. And I guess I wanted to see if you had anything, like parting words of wisdom or, hopes for the future, and it doesn't have to be about music, either generally or personally. Yeah.
well, it's interesting. While I was waiting for this interview to start, I read an article on Stereogum today where they were interviewing David Crosby about the whole Spotify situation and the way that, it is with music and streaming in these days. And there was a point where he had to say to any aspiring musicians, he straight up just went, "Don't be a musician." Because it's just like so terrible for artists right now. And he was very specific about how he hated to say that to, all these young artists, including his own children, considering. And, I empathize with his viewpoint, and I understand that it's like, it's really difficult, but I guess I can view it a little more positively than that. Like, I wrote actually a couple long paragraphs about, advice for newer artists. And, you know, essentially what it comes down to is that do become a musician, but also like do be prepared for the sacrifices and the hardships that will have to come with it at the time. And like, because these hardships exist, like it's going to be very, it's going to be very, well, okay. So I wrote that it's very easy to say to always be true to yourself, to let no one change who you are, and to stay authentic to yourself and your art. But like the forces that actively seek to change people in this way are a lot more quiet and secret and insidious than we are made to believe. And a lot of that comes from like how the music industry has centralized itself and how it's taking like so much profit from artists, like preventing them from making any reasonable living or really getting any reasonable exposure in that way. And I wrote that coercion, manipulation, theft of agency can happen to you so gently and so kindly if you don't notice it, because these people, this industry, have become masters of psychological and economical leverage. And to some extent, music reviewers and even just casual listeners all find themselves riding this same train, perhaps not even realizing it. It will be so, so tempting to want to go the full horse with pursuing a professional deal, going commercial, going on to Spotify. Sometimes it will feel like the only option if you want to be a serious musician, if you want to actually make a living doing music. And that's where they catch you, where it ceases to be about music and becomes all about making a living. There lies in the snare of control, and you have to actively and with immense strength sometimes avoid walking into that snare. And it's so difficult these days to avoid that because of like how unprofitable they've deliberately made music for the sake of consolidating their own power.
Yeah.
And I wrote that serious musicians look like anyone and anything. People who release music every week, people who release music every 5 to 10 years, maybe even a single album ever. Serious musicians look like people who tour all the time and people who never tour, people who never even play shows, whether they either don't want to or, like me, have a vision far too expensive and far-fetched to happen, like just yet. You know, calculated success is limiting and boring. The people big in music today are talented enough to do so much more visionary and beautiful music than what they're being allowed to release. And what they lack is the bravery to do so, even with all the power leveraged against them. The music regarded as legendary today happened because of brave musicians willing to say fuck you to what the industry wanted from them, willing to make what was in their heart despite widespread rejection at every stage in your musical life, no matter where you are. You know, don't just be yourself, like be brave, be uncompromising, because even people who are themselves compromise a lot more than they notice a lot of the time. You know, place your feet firmly on the ground, know what it is you want out of your art, and demand that from those you work with. You know, you got to be the person to say, fuck you, pay me, you know, when the situation calls for it. The best people you will work with will be those you won't have to be firm with at all about your vision. But there will be others that require you to be clad in steel. Define your musicianship, your professionalism, your seriousness on your own terms, no matter the cost. Define your sound, your artistry, your vision, your message is the same. There are so many of us working to do the same, and ever so slowly the world of music bends in our direction. It bends in the direction of people like you with perspectives, ideas, and powerful things to communicate. You will always have people on your side to pick you up and give you and the art, you and your art the love it needs. I was homeless for 5 years, and Grimalkin in effect rescued me from that because Grimalkin is on that side. You will be supported. Be brave and uncompromising, but also know that you will have people there to allow you to let those defenses down, to love you, and to love everything you say, everything you will write, and everything you will create. I feel that we are on the dawn of a beautiful era of music, an era that coincides with beautiful transformative change across the entire spectrum of our lives. Our success will not be defined by sales and riches, but by community and family and support the world over. For the most marginalized of us, this will be a tremendous positive change, one that will allow many of us to finally live the happier and more peaceful lives we deserve. If you are among those of us, then this is the time to really invest yourself in that art of yours, music and otherwise. If no one knows you or supports you now, then your time to receive those things is close at hand. Keep being with us. Keep sharing your soul with us. You're a part of something so great.
Oh, that's beautiful, Dani. I don't, we would love to host that on our blog if you wanted to send it to me.
I have it. I will send that to you.
That would be amazing, and with a picture that you want. And I'm gonna schedule that out, and that is, people should hear that. That's lovely.
Okay.
Yes, yeah, and just a word. I've been trying to like kind of get out the word that we would love to have people who are passionate about different topics to be a guest blogger on our blog where we could feature you. We could also put it on our Instagram page. And of course it would link back to you, like to the artist or whoever wrote it. But yeah, that's lovely. That's like the perfect, that's so perfect and beautifully written that, yeah. So thank you for sharing that with us, Dani. And for all of you, again, we're having a listening party tonight on our Discord at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're going to be listening to Dani's album For As Briefly As I Live, followed by Spider Mountain. There'll be a chat where you can ask her questions and she can share thoughts. And at the end, we usually jump on the mic and people who who aren't too shy can ask questions on the mic too.
Don't be
If you
please.
if you haven't joined our Discord, and you want to be there tonight, it is public, but we recommend that you do it before 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, just because there are some rules that we want people to read through and to give a short intro before they're led into this to the rest of the server where we actually have the listening party. The link to our Discord is in the link tree in our bio. So yeah, we hope that we see some of you tonight. Again, that's at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And thank you so much, Dani, for coming on and chatting with me today. It's been really lovely. We're, of course, going to have this interview on our Instagram, but I'm going to be uploading it also to YouTube. We have a playlist of all of our Get to Know Us interviews there, and I'll be sharing that again later. But it was really lovely talking to you. It's I really appreciate how much care and thought that you put into talking about these things with us. Yeah, it really. Oh, some people are asking a few other things. I'm missing stuff, so I'm sorry. Somebody asked, and this is a cool question, if you have a favorite synth.
Oh God. Not knowledgeable about synths at all, so I don't know how to answer that. I just like, well, in terms of digital synth, I've honestly been really enjoying Repro 5 recently. So I guess I'll say that one.
Okay, and I apologize if I did miss anybody's questions during this. I tried to kind of keep an eye on things, but I'm not always a great at doing that. But if we missed your question, you can come tonight and ask Dani everything you want to know.
Yeah, you have a chance to ask.
Okay, awesome. Well, then hopefully I'll see some of you tonight, and I'll definitely see you, Dani. All right.
Okay.
All right. You have a good rest of your day until I see you tonight.
This was so fun. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Thank you. Okay. Great. Bye.